Hello, everybody. This is Mike from Dimensional Walking, a paranormal journey. First of all, today I'd like to clarify something. I occasionally will post things on Reddit, and occasionally, of course, I get comments. And I just wanted to make sure that this gets squared away. Somebody on there called me an old man telling UFO stories in my basement. Well, first of all, this is not my basement. This is a really quite nice family room here with, as you can see, light coming in and trees on the one side over here and plants growing inside here and pictures and our dog laying on the couch, et cetera, et cetera. So anyways, and I'm not really an old man. I'm pretty old, but I'm not an old man. So just want to let everybody know this is not a basement and this is not the old man. So anyways, just want to square it away because they're a pretty tough audience there on Reddit, as you may or may not know. But anyways, I had to get that square. Anyways, today what I want to talk about is I want to talk about three stories. As you know, I've been doing this for 50 some years, 50 plus years. I guess that makes me an old man. Doing research and talking to people, witnesses, etc., and various paranormal type things and a lot of UFO abduction stuff. So these three stories I'm going to tell you, the reason I want to tell you these is they're very credible. These are people that either I worked for or they were people of the company I worked for, and they were credible people because I knew them, personally knew them. So what they told me, I did believe. So let's talk about it. The first story we're going to call the Elgin Air Base Tower event. Okay. And the first person I'm going to talk about is a guy named Jim. He was my traffic and warehouse manager, one of my traffic and warehouse managers in Atlanta, Georgia, back in the 80s. So Jim had a military background. He was an air traffic controller. And when he was a kid, he had a lot of missing time experiences. And sometimes he would go missing and he'd be, kind of sort of out in the woods, and then he'd show up several hours later. And of course, his family was going crazy, but this happened several times to him. Also, sometimes he would come to school and it looked like his clothes were inside out and buttoned wrong and just really strange. And the kids would always kind of laugh at him and kid him. As you may know, that is kind of a common thing with some abductees. When they do come back, a lot of times their clothes is misbuttoned. Misbuttoned was a real common thing, although I also did hear about them coming back and the shirt was completely backwards on them. So that was really odd, but that was a little bit of a sign if you went to bed and got up and everything was kind of backwards on. There was always that possibility that it could have been an abduction. So anyways, he one of the bases that he was at was Elgin Air Force Base in Florida. And one day they were, this was, I believe, it was in the 60s and 70s is when he was at Elgin, but I believe it was like the late 60s when this particular experience happened. So he was, in this particular day, he was watching the radar like air traffic controllers do. And all of a sudden he saw a cargo plane coming in, approaching the runway, or approaching the terminal, and on the radar. And he did notice a strange blip at the back of the plane. What was so strange about it is it obviously wasn't another airplane. It was he didn't know what it was. Nobody seemed to know what it was at the time when they first saw it. But as it came in closer, they could kind of tell it seemed to be a circular shape, saucer shape, I guess we'll call it. And I guess they estimated was probably 30 to 35 feet across. So this is quite amazing. And all the other traffic controllers came around and was watching this. So as it came in closer to the runway, they could easily see it, what it was. And it was a saucer shaped, and it was like 30, 35 feet across in their estimation, looking at the size of the plane, et cetera, at the time. So that the people inside the plane could not see it because it was like right behind. Okay. And so, but the air traffic controllers could see it easily in. And just before the plane was going to land, this object, and we'll call it UFO for all intents and purposes, shot straight up in the air and was like at about 200 feet, they estimated. And the plane landed, no problem. But the UFO actually came directly over the air traffic controllers, who were on a deck, like a deck that was outside of the tower itself, the observation deck, I guess you would call it. So what they did is they sat there and watched it. It came right over their heads. And that was a little bit of the strange thing, because after, there was some debriefing that went on after the event. But anyways, they were standing there, and they all kind of estimated a different time of how long this all lasted. Some people said 3 minutes, some people said 40 minutes. It was all over the ballpark, okay, which was really strange in its own right. So anyways, the UFO came over, it stayed over there, basically over their head, actually came down lower. I think he said it came down probably 100 feet, okay? And then eventually it just took off. I think he said that they had scrambled a couple of jets, he thought, because he could hear things around him, but he couldn't really. It was really strange. They were like in some kind of a void or something, because they all kind of said that right after the event. It was in, like, they were in a bit of a twilight zone, I guess is the way one of them put it. So anyways, the UFO took off, and that was kind of the end of that. And then they were all, the base was shut down. They completely shut down the whole base, because there was other people that saw the event from a distance. These traffic controllers, they were right underneath the UFO. So anyways, everybody was debriefed on it. They were told, they had to, tell them what they saw, what they felt, all these good things. And they were told, obviously you can't tell anybody, blah, blah, blah. And that was a great thing. It was interesting. One of the takeaways on this for me was that Jim told me that these air traffic controllers stayed friends for the rest of their life, real tight bond. Okay. But here was the trick. They never talked about the event ever again. Now, they could have done it. It wasn't that the military restricted them to talk about it, but they didn't want anybody else to know about it. In fact, Jim said he didn't know why he even told me, to be honest with you, but it seemed like I had a little bit of an ability throughout my life where I would talk to people and they would tell me some really amazing stories. And they never told anybody else except for me. Now I'm very open to it. So it's probably the reason. I'm very encouraging if they know something to tell me, and I'm not going to call them, silly or crazy or anything else. So anyways, that's the Jim story. I think it's a pretty fascinating story. I believe Jim. Jim had some other really quite amazing things happen to him, and maybe I'll tell a few of those stories in the future also. So that's number one. So let's talk about number two. Number two, I'm going to call Snowmobiles on the golf course. Okay. So I ran several warehouses in Atlanta, Georgia, in the 80s. And it was for a large apparel company. And so there was a director of HR. He would come and visit us maybe once or twice a month. And he was a real nice guy. Everybody seemed to like him, etc. And for some reason, I just had a feeling that he had a story to tell. Why, I don't quite know. It was one of those gut feelings. I just felt he had some kind of, and he was always really nice to me. And we'd chat about all kinds of things. And I just had a feeling someday he was going to tell me a story. So that someday did come finally. And all of a sudden he approached me in the warehouse and said, "Hey, can we go in your office? I need to talk to you." And of course, he was like a vice president of HR for the whole corporation. And I was a warehouse guy, warehouse manager type. And so it was anytime that guy, he says that could usually mean trouble. So anyways, we go in the office, we sit down, and he said, I understand you believe in UFOs and aliens. And I kind of paused for a minute, didn't know what quite to say, because, I knew he was like, the head of HR, and, a little concerned, maybe he thinks I'm wacky crazy or something. And, I want to keep my job, etc. So, but anyways, at this point in my life, I said, I've been gathering a lot of information. I've been talking to people. And I'm really, I guess, what's the big deal? You gotta kind of come out of the closet a little bit, or otherwise you're not going to grow your wealth of knowledge. So anyways, I said, yeah, I do. He says, well, guess what? I said, oh, geez, my heart kind of sunk, because I didn't really know what that meant. He says, I want to tell you a story. So he did. Anyways, the way the story goes, as some of you would know, if you're from the northern part of the United States, during the wintertime, snowmobiling is a big deal. And so what a lot of people would do, and I did it when I lived in Wisconsin, we would get our snowmobiles and we would go, and, maybe one cold, clear night, and if the moon was out, that was even better, because you could see better. We would drive around and sometimes bar hop between different bars in these little towns, etc. And in this particular case, my particular case, was northern Wisconsin. And, it was a great time. Had a lot of fun. It was very cold usually, but after a few bars, you probably didn't feel anything. So anyways, this particular one, Gene, his name was, he was from Pennsylvania. So they did the same thing over there in Pennsylvania. So one night they were traveling along and they were going across, they were doing their thing and they were jumping between bars, etc. And like I say, a lot of these trails kind of go through golf courses. In fact, the golf courses typically make the trails, so they don't, so the snowmobiles don't go over some of the more sensitive areas like the greens and things like that. So they pass them through areas what will not damage the golfing for the next season. So anyways, they were going through on the path where they should have been, and suddenly all around them, these lights turned on. They estimated it was about 30 feet from the ground. There was very bright lights, almost blinding lights all around them. They didn't make any noise. There was no noises. There was no sounds. Everybody, and then everybody was paralyzed, completely paralyzed. And they didn't know how long it lasted. They were able to kind of think and look straight forward, but they could not do anything else. They were completely paralyzed. And they felt, some of them did feel that there was some missing time. And they all talked briefly after this. I want to just tell you, that's important to know again, that there was a brief conversation right after it. So whenever this ended, they were still on their snowmobiles and they didn't really say anything to each other. They just took off again. And interesting enough, they ended up backwards. Their direction in which they were was in the opposite direction. So they ended up going back to the last bar they went to. And they were all like, at that point, they just kind of woke up and said, what the hell happened? And they really didn't know. I mean, my suspicion was it was a UFO. It could have been several UFOs. There was 15 people in this group, 15 different, well, I don't know if there was 15 different snowmobiles, but there was at least, half of that, because probably people were doubling up. So anyways, these people were surrounded by these tremendous lights. They were all agreed they were paralyzed. Now, what I will tell you is, I told him it was my feelings that I'll have to apply what I call the 1,000-foot rule. And what the 1,000-foot rule is that after years of researching UFOs and paranormal, when a UFO is sighted within about 1,000 feet of you, a witness, typically there is a good chance an abduction has taken place, and that would be you. I don't know why it always seemed to be, because most of the people I would talk to I'd always ask them, how close do you estimate you were? And if they said 800 feet, 500 feet, a football field, whatever, typically what I would tell them is they probably were abducted. And of course, what would happen is they would be telling me their story about, maybe being in a ship or seeing an alien or something like that. So the 1,000-foot rule, I think, is something to keep in mind if you personally have had some type of experience. I'm not saying it's 100%, but it just seems to follow that 1,000-foot thing. So anyways, that was kind of the end of that story. He said that also these 15 people stayed very close together for all their life. As far as, the last time I talked to them, which was probably 20 some years ago, they were very close bonded, but again, they did not talk about the event between them. The initial conversation happened when they were going the wrong way, and then they all realized something strange had probably happened. So anyways, that was that story. Anyways, I enjoyed that one a lot. Okay, number three, we're going to call this one Early Morning Delivery Over a Hill Spectacular. Okay, so one of my supervisors in Atlanta, her name was Barbara, and she had a keen interest in UFOs and paranormal, etc. So we would talk quite a bit, but that did not prepare her for what was going to happen to her one early Sunday morning. Her and a friend would make a little extra money on Sunday morning, and they would deliver the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. They would deliver it out, I think it was in southeast of Atlanta, out in the rural areas. They would deliver the big, thick Sunday. At that time, this is going back 20 some years. It's probably going back almost 40 years now. These big, thick newspapers. And, that was a big thing, kind of had a rural paper route, and actually you could make some nice part-time change doing that. So anyways, they were doing their normal thing, nothing abnormal at all. It was a cool, I think it was a fall night, she said. And anyways, so they were coming around the corner, it was going around the corner of the road, and then it was kind of going up on a hill. When it got up onto the hill, it overlooks kind of a subdivision area of residence, okay? And it was fairly new, etc. And when they came around the corner and went over the top of the hill, they can kind of see down, and what they saw there blew their minds away, completely shook them up for the rest of their life, basically. What they saw was a UFO, a very large UFO hovering over the subdivision. And there was a beam or a column of light that was going down to the ground. And she said at first, she didn't know what she saw, but there was something going through the column of light. And when they got a little closer, they just creeped a little closer, not too much. They actually could see humans that were going up the column of light, just kind of floating up and into the ship. And they were completely in shock. I mean, they kind of realized after a few minutes what they were looking at, and kind of course, freaked them completely out. They backed up, turned around, and went back home. And then I got a call early on Sunday morning. I think I was in work for some reason, doing something, inventory or something, I can't remember. I happened to be working. They were out seeing UFOs, and she was completely freaked out. She said, "You will not believe it. You're going to think I'm crazy." And I said, "Why would I think you're crazy?" And she said her and presently there was a friend, but she eventually married her, saw this UFO, and she explained everything to me. And she said it was unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. So anyways, so she never forgot it. And we stayed friends for many years. And we would talk about that experience she had all the time. It was, there was always a little more detail about it and what she saw, but it was humans floating up, or it looked like, you could see arms and legs moving up, and there seemed to be smaller, different sizes. It was, men, looked at maybe women. I don't know if she could tell easily if it was men or women, but she made an assumption from different sizes. And there was kids too, she said. they were floating up into this craft. And she didn't stay around to see. They were probably afraid they would become one of them floating up in there. And I don't think they were ready for that. So anyways, those are my 3 stories I want to tell you. And I really do believe them to be true. I really do. Like I say, I've interviewed a lot of people, and there's a lot of the interviews I wouldn't repeat because I didn't feel that they were very credible. But these were 3 I did feel that way. And I'll probably do again another video sometime in the future about UFOs, etc., and some really good stories that are very credible. Okay. So with that said, our email address is dimensionalwalking@gmail.com. Please send us any comments. Send us what you'd like to see. Ask questions, whatever you like to do. We answer everything, and we'll go into great detail. We'll have a conversation back and forth with you. Our website is Truth Seeker Forum. There's about 1,800 postings or more of writings I've done, writings Rainbow's done, and other people have done, and also our other really pertinent, really good articles. So I just want to announce that next week on Friday before Halloween, please don't miss it. We're going to do a Halloween special. Maybe I'll dress up like an old man in the basement telling UFO stories or something. You never know. So anyways, that's all I got for today. So happy trails until we meet again. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.